Welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. Well, this week has been something else. We've found that we're not catching fish like we usually do. That's okay. It just makes it a little bit more fun when we do catch the fish. Now, this week I've been very, very sick. I only got out on Monday. I was in the hospital Tuesday. So when you see the segments, well, I sound like a frog. So probably still sound a little froggy. So let's understand what's happening. The inversions are happening right now where warm water and cold water are mixing. And with that, the fish have a lot of natural food sources in front of them. You know, bass can eat trout. It's great for the bass because they got to fatten up for their summer hibernation. And the trout are not where they usually are. In fact, sometimes they're even a little deeper. They're trying to get away from those bass. So in lakes, you're going to have to go with some very slow swimming glide baits and let them sink deeper and deeper. Try to find something that is a rainbow trout type of imitation. You might try soft plastics. Soft plastics are working right now. Ned rigs are doing very, very well for everything. I'm catching everything on Ned rigs right now, but I let it go all the way down to the bottom. What's ended up happening with this mixing of the warm and cool waters is that the fish are congregating towards the bottom, all of them for the most part. So do that this week and see if by going big and small, low and slow, and see what you'll be able to get. It's not going to be as plentiful as it was a few weeks ago, but it's definitely going to give you some results. So let's go on with the show and listen to Michael Ruffino, the Frogman, on the show. All right, welcome back to Terrible at Fishing with Michael Ruffino and Ken Sandusky.
Howdy, folks.
We are going to talk about my adventure. So I apologize. I don't sound like myself. I got a cold, and the cold hits my lungs, and my lungs are severely damaged. So, I probably sound more manly. I like that. I usually go through drive-thrus when I have a cold, so they can say "sir" instead of "ma'am." But I'm watching my weight. So no drive-thrus. So yesterday I go to Lake of the Woods. It's been 2 weeks, because I was visiting my folks in Carson City and stuff, or my wife's folks, and so it's been 2 weeks since I went fishing. Water's quite a bit cooler, 65 degrees surface temp over at Lake of the Woods, and I think you're right, Ken. I think it's the thermocline is just completely confused at the moment. I wasn't catching hardly anything. You catch perch, but perch. I did catch some bass, some largemouth bass. I didn't catch any smallies. So I didn't have a bad day. Just didn't have a great day like I usually have. So I figured, because Ken told me if I troll this thing, I will probably catch a fish. So if you go on to Terrible at Fishing and watch that live of the lake, it's pretty pitiful, actually, because when I broke out my fly fishing rod, first time ever, put it together, I tried casting with it because I've seen videos. I mean, after you see videos, you could do anything, and that didn't work out very well. It just wasn't taking line. And so I can't wait for my first casting lesson this weekend. It's going to be really nice because he's going to show me how to cast it and get that line out there. So what I did, I tied on I don't know what it was. To be honest, I don't know the names of these. So, but it was kind of a hairy bug with a tail, foxtail, and so I put it in the water, and I, pulled out a
Stripping.
bunch of line, stripped the line, and it went behind me, and I lost it because my knot stunk. I don't know. So I pulled it in, and I put on a nymph, and I made sure my knot was really good. I hate when my knots come undone. I must not have seen, because it's just a simple cinch knot, but I did an improved cinch knot on the next one. So, and then I let it out. And to be honest, I was going over in Rainbow Bay on that grass line over by Sunset. I figured that was going to be my best shot at getting, even a dink hitting it, but I didn't. So a friend of mine back east, he works for Joe's Flies. It's a company, and he sent me a bunch of flies. One of them with little spinners. It's like flies with spinners. So I put that on my ultralight cat spinning rod, and it didn't cast hardly at all. I mean, it's so light, and so I threw it out there, and I catch a dink, a little largemouth. And I think, cool. So we're going to put that on, and it's probably sacrilegious because I try to look it up about putting a spinner on a fly rod, and I didn't see anybody that does it. But I wanted something on the line. I wanted to see what it felt like. So I put this little itty bitty spinner on it, and didn't catch nothing. But it was really fun to pull this thing out and at least get the line wet and see, how bad I really am. And, casting, I think you need some of this floating line out in order to give it some weight. Because on the leader, it just wasn't enough weight to pull it out for me. At least, I don't know. I mean, it was my first attempt at ever casting a fly rod. So I was probably doing, I was doing it 10-2, no wrist, 10-2. I watched the videos, 10-2. Wait for it and go. Wait for it and go. Nada. And then, when you strip it out a little bit, it's like it's all over your boat, and it's like, it'll get caught and stuff, and it's just, it was just kind of messy for me. So I probably did I did a lot of things yesterday that, well, it just wasn't right. So this weekend, which, by the way, I have to apologize to all our listeners. Last weekend was not the car show. This weekend's the car show. So tomorrow at Lake of the Woods is the car show. I should have remembered that because they usually have it on my birthday. So I don't know. Yeah, usually around the 11th, which is my birthday. I know it's crazy. I had it before the bad guys destroyed my birthday, 9/11. But and then on the 14th of this month will be the Derby at Lake of the Woods, and I will be hosting it up there. So you will see me, meet me. I'm going to make some baits right there. So while you're not fishing or while the kids are fishing, you can see how I can make spinners or how I can make soft baits and just show you, the process of making baits. I won't be bringing my airbrush, but I will. I'll bring my microwave so I can heat up the plastisol and show you how to mold baits by hand pour it. So it's going to be a fun day. I give away a lot of stuff. I was talking to Joel this week, and Joel is the retail manager. He does the marina, and he's one of the owners. And so we're going to have a really, really, really good event up there, and it's free. The Derby is completely free. The kids will get. I'll try to get. I don't know how much stuff I'll have. Last year I was able to give every child a prize. This year maybe not, because I don't have that much stuff, and I do make it. And maybe the the kids, the ones that aren't fishing, they can custom make, a bait right there. And I can make a bait for them right there on the spot, which is going to be pretty cool. I did that at the Winterfest in February because we had no ice. We called it Winterfest. It wasn't my, and in February we have ice fishing, sort of an ice fishing derby. But this, and this is a free fishing weekend on the 14th. So the 14th and 15th is free fishing weekend. You do not have to have a fishing license, and you don't have to pay to enter the derby. I mean, if you're local, come up to Lake of the Woods, meet me. Maybe I can make a bait for you, and find out why I'm so terrible at fishing, because fly fishing. Although by the 14th, because tomorrow I'm going to have fly fishing casting lessons, so I'm going to figure out how to whip it good without whipping it, just casting it out nice and cool. I've been watching videos, and these guys are just smooth as silk. They just whip it out there. And, they just toss it out there. It's like, it does it. It's just not fair. How long did it take you to get casting, comfortable?
Well, I don't know an answer to that. My grandpa got me a bamboo fly rod when I was about 8 years old, maybe 9 or 10 at the oldest. And a lot of that time was spent out in the yard, just casting to bushes and stuff. But he used to take me to the Link River and Spring Creek pretty often. And so, the feel was there really early on. That there's a big difference between casting a nice loop and being able to hook and fish reliably, and I don't know that I've ever cracked that code. Like I've always talked about, the spinning gear around here is more reliable to catch fish. I've just never really gotten good. There are times where the fly rod will catch fish where the spinning gear won't, especially trout. And then there's always that time, like you're doing right now, where the bass are biting really well, so you just want to mix it up. And then you're usually, catching only the dinks. No, they don't seem to be able to entice the big ones. But I would say, I've seen it, while it's frowned upon by a lot of the purists. I've seen a lot of people using small spinners for trout. And that 1/16 ounce Panther Martin or something along those lines, it's kind of too small to cast anyway with the with the weight of the lure. So often the casting with the weight of the line can come in handy. And then I with the floating line, I've often found that you should be able to feed the line to your guides and get it back there when you're trolling it. But at that point, one of the things I like about that floating line setup is you don't have to keep your speed up after that. You just let it float, and go any speed you want. With the right fly on there, a dead presentation can often be the best.
I was watching a YouTube video. The guy had his spinning rod versus fly rod, and he took both his spinning rod and fly rod out on a river, and it was sobering because he used a spinner on the fly rod, or on the spinning rod, and then he just used some dry nymphs on the fly rod, and it was without competition. The fly rod whooped on it. I mean, he'd cast the spinning rod over and over and over again. He just wasn't getting it. It's probably maybe if you put a jig on it or something. But as soon as that insect hit, the fly hit the water, he got hits, and he got one trout had to be at least 24 inches. It was a big old rainbow, and so it kind of makes me feel good about mixing it up a little bit. Um, you know, rainbow trouts, that's all they eat pretty much is insects. That's all they eat. And, brown trouts, they get a little more aggressive. They'll eat rainbow trouts. When they get bigger, they just eat rainbows. Or kokanee, come October next month when the kokanee spawn at Lake of the Woods. I made some beautiful baits that I have to paint to represent the spawning kokanee at Lake of the Woods next month. And
Oh,
so,
wow. That's going to be great.
oh yeah, I haven't painted them yet, but it's a sort of a
Oh, wow.
beautiful red. And then
Uh-huh.
when I paint it, it's going to really look like a spawning coke.
Wow.
And these things should catch a nice brown next month on
Yeah.
so we'll do some of that. It'll be nice, at Lake of the Woods, because people will see hand pouring baits, is not easy, but it's not hard either, and it takes time. And so when they see a hand poured bait by a local guy, they'll probably see, well, that's why you charge that much, because it's a lot of work. I mean, it's besides painting it, putting eyes on it, and then of course the owner beast hook on it. It all adds up. I mean, hooks cost a lot. Good hooks do. So,
Yep.
and I like gamakatsus and owners. So, I mean, those are my hooks of choice when I make baits. I don't think you'll find much else on my baits than those two.
I'm interested in that kokanee imitation. You make a couple extra, I'll buy them from you.
No problem.
I got a idea around some ice fishing with something like that.
Oh, really? With this
Mm-hmm.
big thing?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, the cokes will start getting real, red up by the end of this month, and
Yep.
They're going to start spawning the first week or two of October. And they'll just be covering the main ramp at Lake of the
Yep.
Woods.
They really like that area out in front of the marina there, and
Yep.
up a little to the north. There's a complex of springs in front of the lodge, and that whole area in there attracts a kokanee every fall.
Yep, and those browns just come up and eat them.
That's right.
Those browns are in the shallows, and normally it's hard to catch a brown trout over at Lake of the Woods, unless you like to do some nighttime fishing. And this time of year we're coming up, I actually have very specific baits just for those guys. And what a fun fish! I mean, they're the monsters. You can catch a 10-pound bass, but you can catch a 10 to 12-pound brown, in Lake of the Woods.
Yep.
It's in there.
Right. Yep.
I think the lake the lake record is 33 and a half inches for a brown. 33 and a half. I mean, that is a beast. And I caught a 27.
Some of those longer fish they can be pretty skinny, but sometimes you get a 24-inch fish that's really fat. So
Yep.
there's a lot of genetic variability and life cycle issues. So you never know. That 33-inch fish could have been a lot smaller than a 22-inch fish weight wise. Way I've seen them. But when you do get one of those, they'll be mean looking. The males will have that hook jaw, the kype, and teeth that'll cut your fingers up. And
yep. When I pulled that in, it was the meanest looking fish I'd ever caught. And I knew I had to gill it, but I wasn't putting my hand inside that mouth. I mean, it was 27-inch thing. It had teeth, so it's actually kind of exciting coming into this time of year, even though it's frustrating a lot of fishermen right now because the fish are sharing that water table, and there's so much natural food for the fish right now. It's really hard for us to catch it. I threw some big swim baits, and I have some slow sinking gliders. I was really working this one spot that I like over at Lake of the Woods, sort of a trench in the lake. And I was letting that thing just sink. It would take like 20 seconds for that slow sinking glider to sink down into the trench. And just trying to hopefully find a big old giant largemouth yesterday, but c'est la vie. That didn't happen. It's been hard to catch some big largemouths. I mean, a month ago it was common, but now, I don't know where they are. I'm all over that lake trying to find them.
Yeah.
So,
Or
but
I
they're
call this
hiding.
time of year. There's usually two times a year I call the doldrums, the summer and winter doldrums, and
Yep.
yeah, this we're kind of in those. If you can scare up fish this time of year, then you're probably a lot better off than a lot of anglers around the area.
Well, you're right, and perch is easy. That's why the Derby focuses on perch.
Yeah, those don't
Um,
count. Perch don't count.
I had a perch. I had a perch hit my swim bait yesterday. I was like, "What in the world are you doing hitting this elongated bait?" And he hit the back hook, but he was a good sized perch. But they perch has really sharp fins. I don't
Yep.
like perch. Those
Yep.
fins are so sharp. You just got to sort of work the head down and sort of push them down, and then release the hook. Now, I live release them, and a lot of people, they'll just kill them and let them float for the ospreys. But yeah, I have a hard time slapping the head and putting them back in the water. So
I never was a big fan of that either, but I will take home just about every perch I catch and try to get a fillet off of it.
they do taste good. I'm just lousy at filleting them. And I have a friend that he's really good at removing getting the meat off of the bones, and he will just keep them. Um, at the event, we invite the Badger Run, I think, is the wildlife rehabilitation over in Keno, Badger something, and they will use the caught perch for their animals. Any animals like raptors that eat fish and whatnot, and they'll use it for that. They have to X-ray them. That's what's so interesting. At the wildlife rehab, they will X-ray, make sure that there's no weights in them or lead or anything like that, hooks, in order to make sure that when the animals eat it, they're not going to hurt themselves. So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
the eagles especially, but all the raptors are exposed heavily to lead. A lot of the
Yep.
eagles that end up in care facilities like that are there for lead poisoning. And, that's largely from anglers and duck hunters in California. They've gotten rid of lead shot entirely,
Yes.
largely for a couple of different bird species that have a tendency to eat that. Birds, they need that grist in their gut. So they eat rocks to help digest their food. And
Huh.
if they're if they're in the rocks and there's a bunch of lead BBs or sinkers in there, then they're liable to ingest that lead. But with the eagles and the other kind of higher the food chain predators, there's a bioaccumulation, and it's kind of like DDT back in the day where it wasn't enough. One dose was, if they ate one poisoned rat, the eagle would be fine. But after 10 or 12, it starts to accumulate to a lethal dose. And that can happen with lead too.
Yep. No, there's some states that have outlawed the
Okay.
use of lead, not only in buckshot, but also in fishing.
Yep.
And there was a bill before Oregon State's legislature to outlaw it. It didn't go through, but it was there. So they'll probably try again to try to outlaw lead in fishing. Although I guess a lot of it is buckshot that
Yep.
the animals do eat. So I don't know. I never hunt. So I don't
It's
know.
not a popular, effort among sports people, outdoors people, but because when the state or anybody else, and we've talked about this, needs to legislate common sense, then it's a one bad apple scenario. A lot of
Yeah.
us are out there being really careful, picking that stuff up, and are using it in a responsible fashion where it's not going to create those issues. And then all of a sudden, because a few people can't manage themselves, all of a sudden we lose access to a really important tool. And yeah, let's see you pour your own jig heads when you can't use lead. So they're going to take that entirely away from you. You cannot melt tungsten on your own without specialized equipment, and lead's much easier to work with.
Yeah, it is. The tungstens are becoming more and more popular because of state mandates. And the nice thing about tungsten too, it's a much higher density, so smaller is heavy, and so you can get an 1/8 ounce that's much smaller and more of a finesse
Yep.
than a lead one would be. So, and then it also communicates, any kind of when it hits rocks, it communicates it more more thoroughly than lead does, which kind of softens the blow. So it actually, there are some really nice things about tungsten, but it's expensive. Oh my goodness, you're paying, $2 or $3 a weight, and that just, and something else too, I do not use split shot. I mean, I hate split shot, in fishing, because split shot creates tension when the fish bite it. So as soon as the fish puts the hook in their mouth, they feel the weight of the split shot. And a lot of bass, or not bass, but trout, they will release. So we typically will use, a slide weight, some like a torpedo weight, bullet weight, whatever. And it will slide on the line. But I've been watching videos on fly fishing, and fly fishing uses split shots once in a while to get the flies down into the water column. And then indicators. I don't use bobbers at all. Now, fly fishermen are smart. They don't use bobbers. They use indicators. They just renamed it. That's all they did. They just renamed it. And it sounds better. You put an indicator on this thing 24 inches up and, whatever. And it's a bobber. So,
a strike indicator or a float. The steelhead jig folks do that too. They call it a float. Don't dare call it a bobber.
I know, but it is a bobber. It is.
Agreed.
So I guess I'm going to have to buy some.
The indicators that are often it's just a piece of string, nylon string, and you fluff it out. So I mean, if you're
like wool,
there's lots of indicators that look just like a bobber, but there's probably more indicators that look a lot different. And so in certain cases where it's a better terminology because you're looking at a wider array of gear. And then when you start talking about floating jigs for steelhead or salmon, then you're talking about a slide float, right, with a bobber stop above. That's a whole nother area we could discuss about that string that slides up and down the line to stop your bobber, and then you can set your float depth at any depth you want, but cast with the float right at the lure, so you don't have to worry about that long leader and managing that while you cast. So you might get into that someday, talking about sliding floats.
Well, it's the more I look into fly fishing, I still don't know all these flies. I bought a fly box, and I got all these flies in my fly box now. I have no idea. Hopefully, David or Robert this weekend, when teaching me how to cast, he can teach me what in the world to use in Klamath County mostly, and I'll learn from there and start here and progress after that. But yeah, it's interesting that on fly fishing they will use strike indicators, or in regular fishing we call them bobbers. And I had no idea that's what you did. And sometimes you can use a dry fly, which something else I didn't know. They use this gel flotation.
Yeah, floatant. Mm-hmm.
Floatant. Yes,
floatant,
they put floatant on the dry fly, and it sort of waxes it, I guess, or something, makes it water resistant, and so it will not sink. And so it's all these little itty bitty things that. It's a lot.
if you put floating on a dry fly or use a really floaty fly, right? Some of these flies are even made out of styrofoam that float really well. And then you can tie a dropper off of the hook shank to a beadhead nymph or something like that. And then you got a surface fly and or a leading fly with
Yep.
a dropper to a more likely smaller fly and double your offering, or use the fly as a float, as a strike
Yep.
indicator. And that's a great technique for what you're doing, where trolling in a still water situation, or even just getting it out there and leaving it sit. Because again, that dead presentation can often be your go-to, and you just don't have to mess with your line. Then you just
Huh.
got it out there. Just basically keep it tight, and keep be able to see your indicator, and do whatever you want to do after that while you wait for a strike.
Well, I was really hoping I'd catch something yesterday, on that fly rod because it was like going out there and it's my first fish ever on a fly rod, and it felt like my first fish ever. So it didn't matter. I mean, I caught a dink, which was about the size of an anchovy, a largemouth bass, and that wasn't on the fly rod; that was on the spinning rod. And I'm thinking, I would have been happy with that on my fly rod. I would have been happy with it. Thing's the size of an anchovy. I mean, basically, you're catching, which is illegal to do, but it's bait size. So I was just wanting something. I was willing to do anything to get something on this line.
I've been there. I've been there. It seems like the more you want it, the harder you work for it, the more difficult it is to obtain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what and I got, I had another rod I wanted to christen because there's two rods I haven't christened yet with fish. And I took them out for their first time yesterday. My fly rod and my big swim bait rod. This one can throw 4-ounce swim baits, and that's a great springtime rod. But this time of year, I was really working that trench, sending that big old giant swim bait that I painted, and it looks so good in the water. Oh my goodness! I'm looking at it. I says, "Oh man, I'd bite that." It's just like it looked so perfect in the water. I painted it with my zombie. I do zombie baits, which basically gives me free for all of creating a bait any way I want. And even though it had sort of a crappie pattern to it, it had so many really cool colors, including reds, which made it look like a damaged fish in the water.
Yeah.
It looked really good in the water. And so I was really hoping it would catch. And then I threw some of my hand poured swim baits out there, hoping maybe something would hit that. But it just didn't materialize yesterday. Hey, I'm getting to the end of my season for bass. So reason I picked up, you talk about winter fishing on fly fishing, and I can extend my season. If I'm not out on the ice, which didn't happen last year, I could be out on a river and fly fishing.
Yeah, that I think we need to do a season ender trout season ender show sometime soon. And so you got until the end of September
Yeah,
with a lot of those tributary rivers, but then October 1st, the Keno Reach opens up, and that'll run through the winter. And often, like, that's a spot down there where you don't need a lot of casting skill if you can find a likely hole and flip that fly from the bottom of the hole to the top of the hole, and do that all day. That you got a pretty good bed of getting a fish. Probably want to go with something that looks like a minnow or a leech, which also is heavy enough to sink down a little bit. But that's where I cut my teeth at actually hooking and landing trout on a fly rod. And it doesn't take a lot of casting skill to cast in close. If you're wanting to
yeah,
fish other than one hole, then your casting skills come into play, because that's kind of a difficult reach. And you definitely don't want to be wading down there without a good experience and gear, because it can be pretty dangerous.
yeah. I don't want to fall in again. I hate falling in water. 2 years ago.
Especially with waders on. Yeah, you do not want to
Yeah.
fill up your waders.
Oh, it was so funny. In junior high school, I think it was, I don't know, seventh grade, we took a ecology class. And this back in the 70s. And so the Mr. Spillman, I still remember his name. And he was so much fun to prank because he was a prankster and we pranked him. One time we took his Volkswagen Bug and there's a bunch of us lifted it and we shoved it in between two buildings. There was no way he was going to get that thing out. I mean, we put nose to building and tail to building, bumper to building. There was no way. But Mr. Spillman, he would play practical jokes on us and we would do it to him. And one time, I don't remember the kid's name. I can see his face, but we went out to a sort of a still area at a beaver dam, and we were supposed to collect all the, sort of samples of bugs and stuff like that and learn the ecology of that little area. So this kid, he had waders on. Good for him. I don't think we were there 5 minutes before he fell into the river and he filled up those waders. And we were just reaching into his waders, pulling out bugs because it was like, we don't have to go out and get samples because the kid collected, his waders full of samples of bugs. And he was freaking out, of course, but we were cool. We were just kept pulling out bugs. That's my waiter story.
We did it. We did a little bit of that in grade school too, Mr. Bright, along the Link River up there at Riverside School. And I remember we would catch chub minnows and keep them in a fish tank. And everybody hated the smell, but I remember going into the classroom and just thinking it smelled great because it made me feel like I was out on the river all day.
Yeah. I mean, back then we had really cool teachers. They took the kids out.
They're not allowed to do stuff like that anymore. Might get somebody hurt.
I guess, but now there's sort of I call it a polytechnical school. Eagle Ridge became this career school for high schoolers. And so now they're teaching trades at this new school that they converted from Eagle Ridge. And, in Fresno, we had a school like that called Duncan Polytech. And it was really nice. They actually built a house and then they'd sell the house and they'd build another house, so they'd learn electrical, carpentry and all that other stuff. I don't know if they teach fishing. I don't know if they do.
I tell you what, at Eagle Ridge, they got one of the best guys to do so. My good friend Wally, who I see you've had some interactions with on Facebook and an encounter out on the lake there. But he's been there really all along. I think pretty close to when they opened up and been helping with the transition to the new curriculum and stuff. And he's about as hands-on, experienced type of person as you can get when it comes to anything outdoors. Fishing or hunting, but also building or mechanicking or whatever. So they got themselves a pretty good all around kind of guy there. And my friend Wally.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good school for the kids. When we were kids, we were taught trades in regular school. I mean, I was taught how to weld. I was taught carpentry. I was taught how to fix cars, build cars, restore old cars. I mean, my school had, and this totally apart from terrible fishing show here, but we had 9 lifts in my school for cars. And we had a full machine shop, full diagnostics. It was the coolest. Wow. And I became a really good person. If you wanted your heads rebuilt, on your car, I could do it in 2 periods, hour and a half, bam, I can have it done. It was awesome. And some guys were better at blocks, milling and honing and stuff like that, but it was, schools nowadays, you just kind of miss the passion. They don't create passion. Today's the first day of school for, we're recording this on Tuesday, but today is the first day of school. My little girl, which is the only one in public schools, she went to school today. And it'll be interesting, because it's a new school for her. She's in 10th grade. And so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what the day brings. Hopefully she likes her new school. But I do wish teachers brought them out more, into the ecology,
Yeah.
because as we talk about what ecology does, the environment does
Yep.
to everyone. I mean, there are organizations that teach fishing, fly fishing, and other fishing to disabled veterans.
Yep.
And because it's mentally better, it helps them deal with the PTSD that, they suffer from, or anybody for that matter. I have PTSD. And so I understand, the fight, to keep your mind clear. And when you're out on the water or by the water, you are not thinking about your plight anymore. You're thinking about the fish, catching my first fish
Yeah.
on my fly rod.
That's right. That's right.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I wish, look where we live. Well, we got Uwana, we got Lake, we got Upper Klamath, we got water surrounding us. We got the Williamsons, we got the Wood, we have so many. We got Lost Creek, or that's Lost Creek, right? And or Lost River. I don't know. It's not lost. I know where it is. But I mean, we got all this water around us. I mean, as a kid, you could just walk to water and start fishing.
Yeah.
And I hope that's, when at the Derby and at the children's fishing event that we hold, also, it's love to see that. I was meeting a child yesterday. I was at the lake yesterday, and this family was in the marina, and she looked at me, and she looked at her son. She says, "Oh, this is the guy that made the bait that you used," and he had never caught a fish before. And he caught fish after fish after fish after. I mean, it was like the best advertising for my baits until he lost his bait. And I told him, I says, I lost one today too. I says, you're not alone. I mean, we all lose baits.
Yeah.
But he was so excited. He told me, this little boy is probably about, I don't know, 9 years old. He was telling me how much fun fishing was, and that he was, for the rest of his life, he's going to be fishing because of the experience that he had, and it was just, that's what you want to do. And it was such a wonderful thing, in the marina yesterday, that we, it makes you feel good. It just makes you feel good that you had an effect on somebody in a good way.
Yep. Yeah, there was a time in my life as a young adult that I looked around at the way things are and just said, it's not worth it. There's nothing we can do. And I acted like I'd given up. And I woke up one day and I said, I'm going to kill myself with this attitude. I'm just not living a good life. And, plus you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And no matter how hopeless things are, you should try to do something about it. And it was really that it was fishing that got me thinking like that. And I've always thought since then that when that line's in the water, especially when it's hooked to a fish, but anytime the line's in the water, it's a connection to creation. You can't disassociate from what's around you while you're enmeshed in the activity. Because and if you take the time to look up and look around and notice the other critters on the river and things like that, then you're really part of it. And I know hunters and anglers and even hikers and bikers and stuff like that, they all kind of get that same kind of connection through their passion. And then that is what can help you guide you when you're down and out in a way, or you haven't gotten back. If you can remember the smell and the feeling, and when that rod bends over and starts head shaking, you can't forget that feeling, right? So now you can't sleep at night. You're laying in bed, or you're otherwise worried about something. You always have that memory to draw from, that muscle memory. Again, I talked about fly fishing before. I've gained hours and hours of sleep over the years from that muscle memory, that feeling of of casting a fly rod. And so it's more than just about catching fish for a lot of us.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you it saved my life too. I mean, and a lot of our listeners know that 6 years ago I was paralyzed with a blood clot in my brain that just wouldn't. It was huge, and now there's a big scar there. But eventually, it grew more blood vessels around, and I was able to start recovery 7 months later. And um, there was an ADA fishing dock, about I don't know, 30 minutes from my house, and that's why I really think that, people should speak up for this ADA fishing dock that Lake of the Woods wants to put in. I think, there was when you're paralyzed, I mean, all you got is to think about how bad your plight is. It's just, I couldn't speak probably, most of the time. I mean, I couldn't get words out. It was terrible. It was so frustrating. But when I was taken to the dock and I could see people catch fish, even though I couldn't catch fish, and then listen to the kids and listen to the water and watch the sunrise and sunset, it was just totally different. The osprey chirping, and my son named that osprey at that lake Kevin. I don't know why. But whenever we went, Russell would say, "Oh, there's Kevin." One time, a big old giant coyote came up to me. It was the biggest coyote I've ever seen. I mean, it was almost wolf size. It was a big coyote. And he came up to me and he was just waiting for me to give him a fish, I guess. And, I'm telling my son and my buddy, says, look. It's like this dog, or, looks like a dog, but it's a coyote right next to me. And you don't forget stuff like that. And
Yep.
you're right. You can feed off of that,
Yep.
those moments in time. And fishing is beyond a hobby or a sport. It's therapy. I mean, it just is therapy. And you and I, we've had that. I've interviewed people on this channel where they, fishing saved their lives, because you may think, is this all there is? But God's given us something really nice to go out and immerse ourselves in. And it's
Yep.
just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Yep. Yeah, the conversation turns to exploiting creation for your wealth and whatever, and that's not the way I take that
No.
commandment or that message from God. It's a stewardship
Yeah.
requirement. It's a enjoy it, and give back, though. Don't
Yes.
take more than what you're due, what you can use, and hopefully in the long run it's for the betterment of the resource rather than the depletion of it over time.
Yep. Well, I was born and raised near the beach, the Pacific Ocean. So, I mean, just to go out to the ocean and listen, to
Yeah.
hear those waves crashing, and the seagulls, above you, and just there's an ambiance that absolutely is, well, it's unforgettable, and it's something you want again and again. And I took my wife over to Dry Creek's mouth over at in the north part of Lake of the Woods, because in the morning it is a menagerie of sounds. I
Yeah.
mean, it's loud. It's like there's loudspeakers in there. And so I took my wife over there. I go, now just listen. And the sounds just amplified from the forest out to us. And it was phenomenal. And I told her, I says, this is what I enjoy.
Yep.
I catch fish, but I mean, you don't catch fish every cast. I wish, but no, I probably don't wish. You want a challenge, but it's really the most amazing thing. And when you see animals, up on the shoreline, it just makes it like that coyote. That coyote was big. I mean, I'm a big guy. This was a big coyote. I mean, he could have been a wolf. I don't know, but I don't think we had wolves in that part. But he was as big as a wolf, and he just walked up to me, just right next to me, like arm's length. I wasn't going to pet him, but he just sat there looking at me and looking out at the water. I think he was doing the same thing I was doing, and taking it in. And then he knew I didn't have anything for him, and he walked away. But it was pretty cool. I mean, most animals are not aggressive towards humans. They're just not. You know, how many people are killed by a bear in a year? Not many. Or sharks. Not many. Sharks, because they have no eyelids, they actually bite and release. So a lot of good scars out there that you could tell stories for. But, you know, to be killed by certain animals is just rare. I love it when people are afraid of a spider. You know, I know. Everybody says, "Oh, spiders are scary." But when was the last time you heard on the news that somebody was killed by a spider? I mean, it just doesn't happen. So, yeah, we have black widows, and I guess there are, the brown one. I forgot the name of it, but that's a really bad one. But most of the time, it's just a spider. We used to collect tarantulas as kids out of the ice plant, and we'd take a stick and we'd wiggle the web, and the big tarantula would come out, and we'd jar it, and we would, we did what little boys do to little girls, and we'd share our find with little girls. Oh, well, we were little boys. But we had, in fact, in my hometown, you'd see signs called, it'll say tarantula crossings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually says it. Tarantula crossing. They migrate by the hundreds, and they will blanket the roads.
Yeah.
And it is just, it's actually kind of a gross thing, because when you drive over them, you just killed like 50 of these things. But they just blanket the roads in my hometown.
Yeah.
I've never seen spider crossing signs anywhere else. It's just, I guess, Santa Barbara County, I guess. It's just what it is.
I've seen the frogs do that up at Sprague River. So many frogs on the road that you can't hardly even see the road. Yeah. In fact, even here, there was a news report where frogs came up into town here in Klamath Falls, and it was like a plague from Egypt that had come. So, but Fresno had little tiny frogs that would come up into your yard, just little tiny ones. They were like 1 inch, and probably good for bait, but I didn't think about it. Yeah, we had a lot of frogs, but my wife loves frogs. Yeah, if you kill a frog, you're just doing bad things. She loves. Oh, yeah. I don't know why. She just, I always wanted a pet rat. My wife, she likes frogs. She hates rats. So I like frogs too, but the bullfrog is probably one of the worst invasive critters around here.
It's a loud one.
We were fishing a little pond about 2 months ago now, and I could see the bluegill in there, but I couldn't get them to bite for some reason. And the whole shoreline was just lined with bullfrogs. And so I got to cast into the bullfrogs instead. And that was pretty fun fishing, believe it or not. There's times where the bullfrogs will bite and put up a fight just as good as any fish.
I caught a bullfrog once at Lake of the Woods. Yeah. I mean, it's just the dumbest thing I mean, what are you eating a frog for? Because I was throwing frogs. And he hit it. It was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's leave him on the line and cast him and see what happens.
I grew up on Riverside Drive, and before they put in the Southside Bypass, there behind Green's Golf Course, that was some pretty wild country back in there, and we spent a lot of times on our motorcycles and with our fishing rods. But Lake Awana is not the best fishing, and so I actually spent a lot of time with my fly rod on the ponds back there, catching bullfrogs. And there
Really?
was a guy that lived in the trailer park there across from Green Springs Market that would give us a quarter a leg for the bullfrogs in a bucket. So we would
Quarter
go with
away.
our BB guns and our fly rods and one of my friends had a golden retriever that was just really adept at bringing in the frogs that we'd shoot. So that I spent a lot of time bullfrogging when I was a kid.
Yeah, frog gigging is quite the adventure too. I
Yeah.
mean, when I met my wife, we were living in Modesto, and they frog gig there. A real
Yeah.
thick tule frog,
Yeah.
in the rivers there, and and they just go out there with this big old pitchfork. It's a big old long stick
Yep.
with a fork in it, and they're just
Big.
bam, they're just they're getting them.
Yep.
And I happen to really like the taste of frog legs. I mean, it actually tastes like chicken. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're getting them bullfrogs, then you're doing the native critters a favor too. They're just prolific eaters, and they're not native to this area. So yeah, that's one of those critters where hunting them is doing a service to the other critters in the system. I always watch these shows like red deer in New Zealand or how pig hunting in Hawaii or whatever, and think we don't have anything like that around here. These kind of invasive species that offer a good hunting opportunity, but when it comes to bullfrogs, we do have that around here. So the more the merrier.
Yeah, my hometown, which is surrounded by Vandenberg Air Force Base. Vandenberg Air Force Base has 5 lakes on it, and it's got the best part of the shoreline of California on it.
Yeah.
And I would go out to these lakes all the time. I mean, I'd fish every one of those lakes all the time growing up. And South Vandenberg, if you want to do some crabbing or some abaloneing or even some surf fishing, I mean, you just went to South Vandenberg where NASA was, it's just, and you see these launch pads just lined up on the beach line. I mean, you look up the beach line, there's nothing but launch pads, what we call slicks, space launch complexes, and slicks are just lined up. And it's fun. I mean, because they launch rockets all the time. So back then it was mostly Minutemans and then NASA. Now it's all NASA pretty much. In Lompoc. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, I had a great time growing up where I did. I mean, we just walked to the beach, and sometimes we see a rocket launch, and sometimes we just catch fish.
That sounds fun.
It actually is pretty cool. And one time I took my kids to it to see a heavy payload rocket. It was a Saturn V being launched. I mean, it was a huge rocket. And I take my kids, my whole family there, and they found a dead coyote skeleton, in the bushes where my vantage point was to Slick 3. And they would not take their eyes off of it. And there's this rocket just, it's going up, plumes are going, and they're watching this. I mean, a skeleton that ain't going to move. Watching kids look at the rocket. But Dad, that's not going to move. This is moving. Kids, I mean, to them it's a fascination. The whole skeleton of a coyote right there, and they just thought it was the coolest thing. Cooler than a rocket going up in space.
That's funny.
I know. I mean, I was so disappointed. We came here to see this thing go, and it was like, there it goes, and there was a skeleton. All right. Well, Ken and I, we want to thank everybody for tuning in this week, and I'll be in a much better health-wise next week.
Yeah, I feel better.
Yeah, this is just horrible. But and then do not forget some of the things that we've talked about. Things like the September 14th Derby, which is free at Lake of the Woods. It's a free fishing weekend. So even if you don't come to Lake of the Woods, just get a rod, go out to some water on the 14th and 15th, and just have a wonderful day with your kids, picnic it, and just enjoy the day. There's a car show. I love cars. I'm a gearhead tomorrow. at Lake of the Woods. That's a big. If you don't get there early, you ain't going to get in. And then Ken and I always tell you guys to the same thing every week, right? But Ken,
Yes, sir. Leave it cleaner than you found it, huh?
always
Pack it
always.
in, pack it out.
Yep. And yesterday I actually saw something in the lake. I got my net, and it was somebody's potato chip bag that was floating in the lake. So just make sure that you pull out is anything that you see and leave it cleaner than when you found it. So thanks everybody. And Ken, thanks a lot. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
next week.
Feel better now.